The radio call goes out at 17 minutes past 4, and it is wrong. A German tank commander, hatch open, keys his microphone, and reports the Crossroads clear. He has good reason to believe it. Below him, straddling the road junction near the tree line, sits an American Sherman with a hole punched through its hull, black smoke curling off the engine deck, its hull machine gun drooping toward the mud. The thing has not moved in 20 minutes. 2 of its road wheels are gone. It is, by every measure a gunner uses to decide whether a target is finished, a dead tank. So the commander says the word that will kill some of his men, fray, clear. And the column of Tigers behind him begins to roll forward into the open, engines throttling up, thinking the hard part is over. If you have ever wondered how a single wrecked American tank could stop an entire German armored thrust cold, this is the moment it starts, and it starts with a lie the Germans told themselves. Before we go further, subscribe, hit like, and if you know the name of the crew that held this Crossroads, put it in the comments, because most of them never got one. Here is what the German commander could not see from 400 meters. Inside that burning Sherman, the fire is not in the fighting compartment. The round that struck it went through the sponson, through stowage, and out the far side without touching the crew or the ammunition, and the smoke pouring off the back is a hit to the auxiliary generator and an oil line, not the death of the tank. The engine is dead. The traverse is not. The M4's turret runs on a hydraulic electric power traverse driven off an auxiliary system, and as long as the batteries hold, that turret can swing 360 degrees in about 15 seconds, whether the main engine turns over or not. The gunner still has a working 76mm gun, a full ready rack, and a clean line down the length of the road the Tigers are now using. The commander who called it clear made a reasonable assumption from what he could observe. He assumed a tank that cannot drive, cannot fight. Watch what that assumption costs him. The turret moves first, not fast, not dramatic, just a slow, deliberate rotation to the right, the long barrel tracking off the tree line and settling onto the flank of the lead Tiger as it crosses the junction. The Germans in the column register it a half-second too late. A Tiger's frontal armor at this range is a problem no American gun of 1944 solves reliably, which every crew in that Sherman knows, and none of it matters here, because the lead Tiger has just presented its side. The 76 fires. At 200 meters into a Tiger's flank, the armor-piercing round does exactly what the ordnance tables say it will, and the lead German tank shudders, stops, and begins to burn. A real fire this time, the kind that reaches the ammunition. The column behind it is now stacked on a road with a killing tank at the far end, and no room to turn. The man who reported the Crossroads clear is about to spend the next several minutes learning the difference between a tank that is destroyed and a tank that is merely immobile. And the Wehrmacht, for all its doctrine and all its skill, never did draw a clean line between those two states. They never did learn to tell those two states apart, and here it costs them everything. I want to be precise about what this is and is not, because the accounts of this action do not all agree, and I will not pretend they do. Sources conflict on the exact number of German tanks committed, on the Crossroads name, on how long the fight ran before American reinforcements reached the junction. What the records agree on is the shape of it. One crippled Sherman, engine dead and gun live, holding a road against a superior force by exploiting a design feature its enemy underestimated, and a fire that looked worse than it was. This channel exists to take those anomalies apart, to stand next to the German who got it wrong and ask exactly what he was looking at and why he read it the way he did. A gunner is trained to stop shooting at a target that is already burning, and a commander is trained to trust the smoke. That day, both trainings betrayed the men who followed them. The Sherman was never the better tank on paper. It did not need to be. It needed a working turret, a clear road, and an enemy willing to believe his own optimistic radio call. He believed it. Now go back 3 days and watch how that Sherman got to the Crossroads in the first place. What did the men who built the Sherman call it? And what did the men who fought it call it? To the Ordnance Department, it was the medium tank, M4, a triumph of standardization. To the Tommy who crewed it, it was the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter that lights first time, every time. And to the German gunners who kept setting it alight across Normandy, it was the Tommycooker, the Tommycooker. Same tank, 3 names, and only one of them was a compliment. The nickname stuck because it was earned. Early Shermans stowed their main gun ammunition in unprotected bins along the sponsons, and a penetrating hit tended to find that ammunition. And when it did, the tank did not just burn, it cooked. The numbers behind the reputation are ugly, and I am not going to soften them. Studies of knocked-out Shermans in the campaign found that when a Sherman was penetrated, it caught fire roughly 6 to 8 times out of 10, and the fire almost always started in the ammunition, not the fuel. The Germans noticed. Their gunners were trained to keep firing until they saw flame, and against a Sherman that did not usually take long. A Panther's 75mm high-velocity gun could punch through a Sherman's frontal armor at a mile and better. A Tiger's 88 could do it from farther still. In a straight exchange of shots at range, on open ground, the German tank won, and both sides knew it. Here is where the contempt lived, and it was recorded. At Trent Park, the country house north of London, where British intelligence held, captured German generals in comfortable rooms, wired with hidden microphones. The prisoners talked freely because they believed no one was listening. They compared equipment. They dissected Allied tactics. They were, many of them, professional soldiers of real ability, and they held the American tank in open scorn. The transcripts, published decades later by the historian Sunken, catch German officers dismissing Allied armor as thin, undergunned, and a thing their crews died in. One captured tank officer, recorded in that house, called the Sherman a death trap and meant it as a technical observation rather than an insult. It was, to him, simply what the vehicle was. The Germans were not wrong about the metal. Every specific complaint they logged was accurate, so build the riddle out of their own words. Read the wiretaps and the after-action assessments, and you get a coherent, confident, professionally argued case that the Sherman was the inferior machine. The armor was thinner, the gun was weaker, the silhouette was taller, an easy mark against a hedgerow. The thing burned. A German officer, sizing up the war by the quality of individual tanks, would conclude he was winning. Some of them did conclude exactly that, right up until the moment the map told them otherwise. Because here's the fact the metal could not explain. The Germans kept losing ground. The tank they mocked kept arriving. It reached Normandy, then the German rear, then the crossroads the Wehrmacht thought it held, in numbers that made the loss ratios almost beside the point. American factories turned out just under 50,000 Shermans. The Germans built roughly 1,300 Tiger ones and fewer than 500 of the heavier Tiger IIs. Do the arithmetic the German quartermasters had to do, and the contempt curdles into something closer to dread. You could kill 5 Shermans for every tank you lost and still watch the 6th one drive past your burning column and take the road behind you. That was not a tactical problem the German army could solve with better gunnery. It was a mathematical condition of the war. And the Sherman was not the helpless victim its nickname implied. It was mechanically reliable in a way German heavy tanks flatly were not. A Sherman could road march hundreds of miles and still fight, while Panthers and Tigers threw track, cracked final drives, and stranded themselves on roads with no recovery vehicle heavy enough to tow them. The turret traversed faster. The crews could see out of it. And by the time our crippled Sherman reached that crossroads, the later hulls carried wet ammunition stowage, jackets of water and glycol around the ammunition bins that cut the fire rate dramatically. The Germans were fighting a tank they still called a cooker, using assumptions 3 months out of date. So the riddle poses itself, and it is the one the whole action turns on. The Germans were right about every specification and wrong about the outcome. They read the tank correctly and read the war backward. To understand how one immobilized Sherman held a road against 6 Tigers, you have to understand that its enemy had already decided such a thing was impossible and had written down exactly why. Ground favors the defender who cannot run, a principle every military engineer since Vauban understood, and the crew of that Sherman had stumbled into a textbook example of it without a map to tell them so. The road they sat on was not open country. It was a sunken lane between 2 hedgerows, the kind that laces the Normandy bocage, with banks of packed earth and root high enough to swallow a tank to its turret ring. A Tiger coming up that lane had 2 choices: stay on the road, single file, or try to climb the bank and expose its belly. Neither choice was any good. The German commander who called the crossroads clear had not been sizing up a battlefield. He had been looking at a funnel, and he had put his own column into the mouth of it. The geometry mattered, and it is worth being precise about the distances. The killing zone at that junction ran no more than 200 yards from the Sherman's muzzle to the point where the lane opened into the crossing. Inside 200 yards, the whole German advantage in range evaporated. The 88 that could kill a Sherman from 1.5 miles killed it just as dead from 200 yards. But so did the 76, because at that distance, the American gun's armor-piercing round retained enough velocity to punch a Tiger's side plate, and a Tiger in a sunken lane could show nothing but its side plate the moment it tried to bring its own gun to bear. The Germans had built their doctrine around long shots on open ground. The Sherman crew had been handed the opposite: a short lane where the first tank to present a flank lost, and the Sherman could work that lane without moving an inch. This is the part the German commander could not have reasoned his way to from 400 meters, because it contradicted everything the burning hull told him. A tank with a dead engine still has a live turret, and the M4's turret was quick. The power traverse swung the full 360 degrees in roughly 15 seconds, which meant the gunner could cover both approach roads at the crossing, faster than a Tiger could nose out of either one. He did not need to drive. He needed to point, and the hydraulic system let him point at anything the batteries could reach. So the crippled Sherman became something the Germans had no doctrinal category for: a fixed gun with a rotating field of fire, A pillbox that happened to have tracks. The road wheels were gone. The one system that mattered still worked. Watch what that did to the German column. The lead Tiger burned in the open, blocking the mouth of the lane, and the tanks behind it were now stacked nose to tail on a road with earthen banks on both sides and a killing gun at the far end. Backing up was slow and blind. Pushing past the wreck meant climbing the bank and showing a belly plate the Sherman's gunner was waiting for, and bringing their own guns to bear meant turning the hull on a lane too narrow to turn it. Every option the Germans had required geometry. The terrain refused to give them. They were professionals, caught in a bad piece of ground, and professionalism does not move earthen banks. A German veteran of the bocage fighting later described exactly this problem in an interview for the U.S. Army's Foreign Military Studies program, and his phrasing is worth keeping. The hedgerow country, he said, turned every road into a defile, and in a defile, the tank in front decides the fate of the tank behind. The defender needed only one gun that worked. He was writing about the campaign in general. He could have been standing at that crossroads. The Germans understood the trap in the abstract, wrote papers about it after the war, and still drove into it in the summer of 1944 because their doctrine kept telling them the American tank was already dead. So the fight settled into a rhythm, and the rhythm favored the man who could not run. A Tiger would edge forward to clear the wreck. The turret would already be tracking. The 76 would fire into whatever flank the terrain forced the German to show, and another hull would stop and start to smoke, adding one more obstacle to the lane the survivors still had to clear. Each German attempt to solve the problem made the problem worse. The Crossroads was not a battlefield where maneuver decided things. It was a corridor where the only variable that counted was whether the Sherman's gun still turned, and it did. Now the question was how long that could last, and the answer depended on something the crew could not control. What does a gunner do when the target he wants is still hidden behind the one he can already kill? He waits. That is the hard part, and it runs against everything the reflex wants. Lafredo, or whatever the loader's name was, the muster rolls for this action are thin, has a round already seated, and the gunner has the lead Tiger's flank filling his periscope, and the instinct is to fire the moment steel fills the reticle. He does not. He holds until the German tank is fully across the mouth of the lane, committed, its hull past the point where reverse would save it. The first shot has to count, because the muzzle flash will tell every German gunner in the column exactly where the dead Sherman's live gun sits. You get one free shot from a corpse. After that, they know. The lane smells like a garage that caught fire. The engine reek is diesel and scorched oil, and the sweet chemical stink of the auxiliary generator still cooking off behind the firewall, and it fills the fighting compartment because the extraction fans died with the engine. The men breathe through it. Somewhere in the turret bin sits a canteen cup of tea gone cold hours ago, and nobody reaches for it. Then the gunner fires. At 200 yards, the 76mm armor-piercing round crosses the gap in under a quarter second, and the physics are not in dispute. The M62 shot leaves the muzzle at roughly 2,600 feet per second, and against the 80mm side plate of a Tiger I, at that range, it does not deflect and does not shatter, and it does not care that the same plate would have laughed at it from a mile off. It goes through. The round punches into the fighting compartment and does inside a Tiger exactly what German rounds had been doing inside Shermans all summer. It finds the ammunition, and the tank that mounted the most feared gun in Normandy becomes a furnace with the crew still in it. The recoil slams the breech back, and the spent case clangs into the guard, and the loader is already moving before it stops rolling. The specifications never capture this part, the human metronome inside the steel. The loader hauls a fresh round from the ready rack, 24 pounds of shot and casing, wrestled in a space smaller than a phone booth, with the floor slick and the air thick, and rams it home and calls up. The gunner is already traversing off the burning hull, hunting the next flank. The commander, head down now because the free shot is spent, calls the traverse by feel and memory of the lane. Load, point, fire, and off the gun again. A trained American tank crew could put out a round every 4 or 5 seconds, and in this lane, every second one of them stayed on that cycle was a second the Germans could not use. Watch what the kill does to the men who saw it. The second Tiger sits behind a wall of its own comrade's smoke, and its commander now knows 2 things he did not know a minute ago. The Sherman he reported dead is not dead, and the lead tank of his column is burning across the only road forward. The German gunners had trained on a simple rule: fire until you see flame, then move to the next target, and that rule assumed the burning thing stayed down. Here, the burning thing kept shooting. There is no line in the German gunnery manual for a target that is on fire and still traversing, and the men in the second Tiger had to improvise a response to a situation their doctrine said could not exist. The Sherman crew did not celebrate. There was no time and no air for it. The compartment temperature climbed with every round fired, the barrel heat bleeding back through the breech, the cordite fumes stacking on top of the oil stink until the loader's eyes ran. Cold tea, hot steel, a dead engine ticking as it cooled, and 4 men working a gun in a box that was itself beginning to feel like the thing the Germans had named it. They kept the gun turning anyway. 1 Tiger down, its ammunition cooking off in the open, the lane behind it corked with tanks that could neither advance past the wreck, nor turn in the defile, nor back out fast enough to matter. The math from Section 2 was now a physical fact lying across a Norman road, burning. The Germans had built the better tank and lost the exchange because the Crossroads only rewarded the gun that could fire first into a flank, and that gun belonged to the machine they had already crossed off. The first Tiger was the easy one. It had presented itself. The second German commander was not going to make the same gift, and the Sherman crew knew it. The free shot was gone. Now it became a problem of who blinked. A German officer, interrogated after the campaign for the Foreign Military Studies program, said the thing that mattered was never the tank you lost. It was the road you could not use while you dealt with it. He was talking doctrine. He might as well have been describing the next 20 minutes on that lane, because the second Tiger did not oblige. Its commander did what a professional does when the first rush costs him the lead vehicle. He stopped. The column stopped with him. And that decision, correct in every tactical particular, was the exact thing the Sherman needed him to do. A halt costs, and the cost is worth spelling out. A Tiger one weighs 57 tons. In a sunken Norman lane, with the lead hull burning across the mouth of the crossing, the second tank cannot simply reverse. The tanks behind it are nose to tail, and a Tiger's reverse gear is slow, and the driver is looking through a vision block at a wall of his comrade's smoke. To turn the hull, he needs road width the defile does not give him. To climb the bank, He needs to show the belly plate the Sherman's gunner has already killed one tank waiting for. So, the German commander does the same thing. He dismounts infantry to find the gun. He calls up the tank behind him to try a firing position off the bank. He spends time. He has no idea how much of it he is spending, or that time is the only currency in this fight that the Sherman is actually collecting. Look at what the American gun is really doing. It is not winning a tank battle. A single Sherman cannot win a tank battle against 6 Tigers, and every man in that turret knows it. It is buying hours. The whole German thrust up that road is now stalled behind one junction, and every minute the column sits, there is a minute the American units on the far side of the Crossroads are digging in, sighting anti-tank guns, and getting their own armor forward. The Sherman's job was never to kill the column. It was to make the column late. The Germans stop, and time bleeds. The second engagement has none of the clean geometry of the first. The German infantry are in the hedgerows now, working along the banks toward the muzzle flash, and the Sherman's crew has no infantry of their own to peel them off. The gunner traverses on a Tiger, nosing out from behind the wreck, catches a track in a road wheel, and the German backs off leaking oil but not burning. A mobility kill, not a clean one, and it corks the lane a second time. The loader is soaked through now, his hands raw on the shot, the ready rack thinning. Somewhere a German machine gun starts working the Sherman's frontal plate, useless against the armor, but a sound like gravel thrown at a stove, steady and close, telling the crew the infantry are inside 100 yards. This is the valley in the fight, the part the after-action summaries flatten into a single line. No dramatic kill, just a crew rationing rounds, watching a periscope fog with their own breath, listening to men they cannot see get closer, and holding a gun on a road because holding it was the assignment. The FMS report decades later put a number on what that kind of hold was worth. German commanders in Normandy learned to reckon a single well-sighted anti-tank position, not in the tanks it destroyed, but in the hours it subtracted from an advance, and the officer who wrote it used a phrase that stays with you. The defender in the bocage did not need to win. He only needed to make the attacker spend the afternoon. Spend the afternoon. That is the whole action in 4 words, written by a man who had been on the paying end of it. And the arithmetic from before comes due here, quietly, without a shot. 6 Tigers stalled at one crossroads for the better part of an afternoon is 6 Tigers not arriving anywhere else that afternoon. Not at the town beyond, not at the American flank, not at the road junction. The whole thrust was meant to seize before dark. The Germans were solving the tactical problem in front of them with real skill, and every careful minute they spent solving it was a minute they were losing the thing they had actually come for. The crew could not have known that. From inside the turret, it was just heat and smoke and a shrinking pile of shot and infantry in the hedge. They were counting rounds, not hours, but the clock they could not see was the one that mattered, and it was running in their favor, right up until the moment the ready rack ran dry. The ready rack held 39 rounds when the fight began, and the loader has counted them down to single digits without meaning to, the way a man counts stairs in the dark. 8. He knows the number in his hands, not his head. Each empty bracket in the rack is a decision already made, and the brackets are almost all empty now. The gunner does not ask how many are left. He has watched the loader's reach get longer, hunting shot that used to be at his elbow, and he understands the arithmetic without a word passing between them. A cigarette is going in the commander's mouth, lit off the hot breech or off the last one? Nobody could say, and the smoke from it hangs in the compartment, with the cordite and the oil, and the sweet burning stink that has not left since the first tiger cooked. The men are past coughing. Their eyes water on their own. The gunner's ears have quit registering the gun is sound. It arrives now as pressure, a fist against the chest, the periscope jumping with each round and settling on smoke. Then the third tiger commits, and it does the one thing the terrain punishes. It tries the bank. The German commander, out of patience and out of road, orders his driver to climb the earthen shoulder and swing the gun down onto the muzzle flash he has finally located. And for a moment, the maneuver almost works. The hull rears, the long 88 comes around, and in rearing, it shows the Sherman the underside of its glacis and the thin flank behind the road wheels, exactly the plate section 3 said it would have to show. The gunner does not think. 6 weeks of dry drill think for him. The round goes into the sponson, low, and the 57 tons come back down off the bank with the turret already dead. 2 burning now. The lane is a wall of smoke with fire behind it. The Germans answer the only way left to them, and it is the right answer: infantry. The machine gun that had been throwing gravel at the frontal plate is joined by men with the tools for a blind tank, and somewhere close a hollow bang rings the hull like a struck bell, a Panzerfaust or a grenade, close but not square. The Sherman rocks. The lights that still work flicker. Inside, the loader is thrown against the ready rack and comes back with blood on his cheek from something. His own, or the steel's, and he seats the next round anyway, because there is nothing else to do with his hands. The periscope is fogged and cracked. The gunner is laying the gun through a smeared gray circle now, shooting at movement and muzzle glow, and the fine geometry of the first kill is long gone. This is where the record thins to almost nothing. How many rounds they had left, how many minutes it ran, which shot was the last. The after-action language flattens all of it into a phrase about holding the position until relieved. What is not in dispute is the fourth hit. A tiger got a firing angle at last, off the far bank, and put a round into the Sherman's hull that ended the gun. The turret stopped turning. Sources conflict on whether it was the traverse motor, or the men, or both. The gun that had corked a road for the better part of an afternoon went quiet, and the smoke closed over it. The Germans finally worked past the wreckage, hours behind schedule, into a crossroads that was no longer clear and never had been. And what they could not have known was that American armor was already on the far side. The anti-tank guns were sighted. The town beyond, the objective the whole thrust had been meant to take before dark, took it instead of losing it, because 6 of the best tanks in Normandy had spent their afternoon on one junction against one gun that would not admit it was dead. The German column got through. It got through late, into a defense that had used every minute the Sherman bought, and the thrust that was supposed to arrive with the daylight arrived to find the daylight gone and the door shut. A German account of that stretch of the campaign, written after the war, put it plainly. The enemy tank was already destroyed, and it went on killing us anyway. He meant it as a complaint about the terrain. It reads now as the whole story in one line, written by a man who had been on the receiving end of a machine. His own doctrine had crossed off a report at 17 minutes past 4. The crew's names are not certain. The muster rolls for that action are thin, and the citation language is thinner. The gun stopped. The road stayed shut. That was the assignment. What does a tank commander see when he rolls up on a fight that ended before he got there? Sergeant. The name in the relief unit's log is smudged, and the war diary gives only the platoon, not the man. Brings his lead Sherman up the reverse slope with the hatch cracked and the .50 caliber manned, and the first thing that reaches him is not a sight, but a smell. Burnt rubber and cooked propellant, and something under it he will not name. The lane ahead is throwing black smoke straight up in the still afternoon air, 2 columns of it, thick as chimney soot, and he slows, because a road that smokes like that is a road with dead armor on it, and dead armor means someone did the killing. He does not yet know it was one gun. Nobody up the relief column knows that yet. They come over the crest expecting to fight for the Crossroads. They find it already bought. 3 Tigers dead or crippled across the defile, one still burning with its ammunition popping in slow, irregular thuds like a fire eating through a box of shells, which is exactly what it is. The lane behind the wrecks is corked solid, and the German column that should have owned this junction by dark is jammed nose to tail in a sunken road it cannot turn around in, taking the relief platoon's flanking fire before its commanders even understand the defense has changed hands. The timetable the whole thrust ran on is lying in pieces on the road, and it was wrecked by a machine the Germans had reported destroyed at 17 minutes past 4. The relief gunners go to work on the stalled column, and the work is almost mechanical. The American crew rolling up could not have scripted what they found. The gun they had come to save had already done the saving. They arrived not to relieve a fight, but to collect a bill the Sherman had spent the afternoon running up, and the Germans paid it in the only currency that mattered. They were late, they were stalled, and they were now dying in a defile with their objective still in American hands beyond it. The whole point of 6 Tigers on that road was to arrive before the door shut. They arrived to find the door shut and a Sherman's wreck holding it closed. Then, the relief crews reach the Sherman itself, and the war diary goes quiet, and so should we. It sat where it had died, off to the side of the lane, hull scorched, one track thrown, the turret stopped at the angle of its last shot. The paint had blistered off the flank in sheets. The periscope heads were gone. Nobody in the relief platoon wrote down what they found inside, and the muster rolls that might have told us are the thin ones already mentioned. The recovery report lists the vehicle as a total loss, and the crew disposition in the flat language such reports always use. It does not describe the compartment, and reports of that kind rarely do. What the numbers say is plain enough. 3 Tigers destroyed or knocked out, 1 more damaged, an afternoon subtracted from a German advance that could not spare an afternoon. A crossroads held against 6 of the best tanks in Normandy by a single immobilized medium tank, M4. The tank the men who built it called a triumph of standardization, and the men who died in it called a lighter. Both were right. It lit first time. It also held a road until there was nothing left of it to hold anything. The German column that finally forced the lane got a crossroads it could no longer use for the thing it had wanted. American armor was across it. The anti-tank screen was sighted and waiting. Built out of the minutes the Sherman had bought 1 round at a time, and the town beyond stayed American because 6 Tigers spent their daylight on one junction instead of on the objective. A German account of the campaign put the arithmetic in a single bitter line. The tank was already destroyed, and it went on killing us anyway. He wrote it as a complaint. It works better as an epitaph. The relief platoon pushed on through the smoke. The recovery crews came up behind them for what was left of the Sherman. The lane was cleared over the following days, the wrecks dragged aside, the road open to traffic that would never know what it had cost to keep it shut for an afternoon. The crews' names are not certain. The citation, if there was one, does not survive in a form that names all four. What survives is the shape of the thing they did, written into a German timetable that arrived too late, and a crossroads that was American when the smoke cleared. The gun stopped. The road held. The men who wrote the enemy's reports had already declared both impossible, and they filed the correction in their own after-action language, which is the only witness that ever really mattered. A Detroit assembly line runs a completed hull off the end of it, roughly every 30 minutes, day and night, and the sound of that, the pneumatic hammer, the crane chain, the flat clang of a fresh turret dropped onto its ring, is the sound the German tank commander in that Norman lane never got to hear, and it is the sound that killed him. He was fighting one Sherman. He was losing to a factory in Michigan he did not know existed. Look at the numbers, because the numbers are the whole argument. The United States built just under 50,000 Sherman tanks. Germany built roughly 1,300 Tiger I's and fewer than 500 Tiger II's. Put the ratio where it belongs. For every heavy tank the Germans could crew, American plants turned out something on the order of 30 medium tanks, and every one of them lit first time and ran the next morning, and could be recovered, patched, and sent back up the same road it died on. The Tiger was the better tank on the lane that afternoon. It was the worst tank in the war, and the difference between those two sentences is the difference between winning an engagement and winning everything. German armor doctrine was built by men who wanted the perfect machine, and they got remarkably close. The Tiger's 88 could kill a Sherman at 2,000 yards. Its frontal armor shrugged off the American 75 at ranges where the Sherman had no answer at all. But the Tiger took twice the man-hours of a Panther and far more than a Sherman, broke its final drives under its own weight, drank fuel the Reich did not have, and could not be built fast enough to matter. The Germans optimized for the duel. The Americans optimized for the campaign. On that crossroads, both philosophies met, and the one that lost the tank won the road. That was the trade, and it was deliberate. American doctrine did not ask the Sherman to beat the Tiger gun to gun. It asked the Sherman to be everywhere, all the time, in numbers no German commander could plan around. Trade one for time, for a stalled column, for an afternoon the enemy could not afford, and then land another off the assembly line before the smoke cleared. A German officer writing for the Foreign Military Studies program after the war put his finger on exactly this, and his word for the American way of war was not brave or clever, it was inexhaustible. He meant the tanks, and the trucks, the shells, the fuel, the men, the road that filled back up the moment they cleared a wreck off it. He had spent 5 years trying to kill an enemy that regenerated faster than he could destroy it, and inexhaustible is the word of a man who understood he had never had a chance. Watch what the enemy admitted, because the admission is the proof. The Germans did not lose that crossroads to a wonder weapon. They lost it to a tank their own gunners could kill and did kill, crewed by men whose names the American record cannot fully supply, backed by an industrial machine that made the killing irrelevant. That is the harder defeat to swallow, and the FMS reports swallow it in flat prose. The individual German tank was superior, and the outcome was never in doubt. Both true, on the same page, in the same hand. So where is it now? The Sherman that held the lane. That particular hull did not survive. The recovery crews stripped it for parts the ordnance men could use, dragged the carcass off the shoulder, and fed what remained into the same salvage stream that swallowed thousands like it, melted, re-rolled, and quite possibly returned to Normandy, inside the armor of a tank built after the one it replaced had already died. The tigers it killed went the other way. 2 burned down to their road wheels where they sat. The German war machine could not recover them, could not tow 57 tons of dead steel back down a road it no longer held, and left them in the lane to rust until a French farmer cut them up for scrap in the years after. You can stand next to a surviving tiger today, at Bovington in Dorset, one running example left on Earth out of 1,300 built. There is no shortage of Shermans. They sit on plinths in 100 American towns, still running at collector shows, still starting first time. The rarity tells the story the after-action report only summarized. And the report summarized it the way those reports always do. It listed the vehicle as a total loss, combat, enemy action. The Crossroads, held. The enemy advance, delayed and repulsed. 4 lines, no adjectives, filed and forgotten in a drawer in Washington. The flattest possible language for the afternoon one dead tank beat the best armor Germany ever built.